So thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon as we discuss the application process and timeline for physical therapy and occupational therapy programs. It is important to note that many of you probably have questions and concerns how the current COVID-19 pandemic might impact your application cycle. And so there is a web link here that provides detailed information collected by the National Association of Advisors for Health Professions. And this information provides links for all of the major health professions associations and their individual updates regarding COVID-19. So you can find information for the appropriate programs here. If there's no information posted, which you can see, there's nothing listed for occupational therapy or for physical therapy currently, because those organizations have not posted any updates for us to share. But you can keep an eye on this link as a centralized location. It is important to note that currently, as of April 8th, we don't have any information from either organization about potential changes to openings of the applications or changes to application deadlines. What we do know thus far is that the GRE has transitioned onto a remote option, so students can select to take the GRE remotely, and you can find that information on the GRE website at ets.org. Okay, so let's move into thinking about the timeline for applying to these programs as a whole. So it's important to know that as you're moving into this application process, it really does run about a year in length. So currently in the spring semester, students should be, at least by this point, starting to think about the GRE and preparing for taking that exam. I would also strongly recommend that students schedule a GRE test registration if you haven't done so already. And so that information can be found on the ets.org website for how to schedule and what dates are available in your individual location. We do encourage students to think about taking the GRE somewhat early in the summer, and we'll talk about that momentarily. In addition, as part of preparing your application, you can start by doing some things ahead of time. One of those things is starting to work on the personal statement. So the personal statement is the largest kind of writing component within the primary application. And in both the occupational therapy and physical therapy personal statement prompts, you're asked to essentially explain your motivation for pursuing either occupational therapy or physical therapy, as well as kind of what your background is that's prepared you for those programs. They do vary slightly. So the personal statement for the physical therapy application is 4,500 characters, and the application prompt for the occupational therapy programs is 7,500 characters. You can find more information about the personal statements when you look into details about the application. And so when we demo both applications later, you'll have a chance to kind of see what that looks like. In addition, I encourage students to start thinking about the schools that they're interested in applying to in the spring semester, so that by the time the application opens, you have a list of schools that you would potentially be interested in applying to. And so this list will probably be somewhat larger than the number of schools that you're actually planning to apply to. And really early research should be based on factors outside of GPA and or GRE scores. You should think about, location, what kind of things do the programs have to offer, what are other important factors for you, particularly around clinical rotations, campus experiences, what type of environment are you looking for, cost of living, tuition, etc. And so hopefully by the time the application opens in the summer, you'll have somewhat of a scaled down list of programs that you can then select based on your individual GPA and GRE scores, which ones might be the best fit for you. Moving into the summer, we encourage students to take the GRE, again, kind of the earlier the better. So the application systems will open kind of mid-summer, so ideally you're wanting to take the GRE anytime in May or anytime in June. The GRE scores, while you will receive unofficial scores immediately, your official scores will not be released for approximately 2 weeks. And so you want to make sure that you're giving your application enough time that the GRE scores have been released by the time you're ready to submit. The other thing that you'll want to do is then submit that primary application. And so shortly we'll talk about the specific timeline for that. And then individual schools may select to have a secondary application. We can talk about the differences between the primary and the secondary application. But as a general overview, your primary application is that centralized application system that you're using to apply to all of the schools that you are interested in applying to. And then the secondary application is school specific and has more specific information relative to the individual schools that you're applying. As you think about moving into the fall semester, this is where schools will begin their interview process. And so at this point, the timeline transitions from more of a centralized timeline to an individual school by school timeline. And so each school will determine the timeline by which they are reviewing applications, they are making decisions about inviting candidates for interviews, conducting those interviews, and then notifying students about admissions decisions. And so it's possible that you could get some interviews in the fall semester. It's also possible that interviews for certain schools may carry over into the spring. Typically, schools are running on a rolling admissions basis. And so what that means is as they are receiving applications before their stated deadline, they're beginning to review those applications, make determinations about who they will and will not be inviting for interviews, and in many cases, going ahead and making interview invitations before that deadline has even passed. So it's very important to make sure that you're submitting your primary application well in advance of the posted deadlines for schools. Typically, after an interview, applicants can expect to receive a decision on their admissions within no more than 30 days. And typically, that admissions decision will be one of three things. The first option is obviously an admissions offer, in which case, congratulations. The second option could be a rejection, in which case you're not offered an admission to that particular program. And then the third option could be a wait list. And so the way that wait lists work is as students are moving forward in the admissions process, receiving potentially for some students multiple acceptance offers and kind of narrowing those down to the individual school that they are choosing to matriculate to, then openings come up at those schools that they have decided not to matriculate to. And then those schools will begin to start pulling individuals from wait lists. So depending upon the timeline of the individual school in terms of when they finish interviews and when students are required to notify that particular school about matriculation, as well as program start dates. So some programs may be starting in a fall semester, some programs might be starting a little bit earlier, perhaps in a summer, like kind of early summer semester. So students can be pulled off of wait lists kind of all the way up until late spring, potentially even into the summer semester for some individuals. As we think about the application systems themselves, so each application system has an open date, and that is when the application for your cycle, so for individuals who would be matriculating essentially in the fall of 2021, will be able to utilize that particular application. So for PTCAS, the application system opens on June the 17th, and it's what we call a soft open. And by that, what I mean is you can get into the application system, you can start beginning to complete components of your application, but you can't actually submit that application to schools until it's fully open on July 1st. That should give you a little bit of an indication that we don't expect for students to complete the PTCAS application within a day. So we do hope that students are taking their time and being very diligent about double checking the information that they're submitting as a part of that application. This is an early opening cycle for PTCAS. So historically, the application has always just been fully open on July 1st. In addition, the physical therapy programs have removed the early decision option. And so they are starting to have new, earlier regular decision deadlines. And so the first regular decision deadline is in August. And so because of that, we strongly encourage students to get their PTCAS application submitted by mid-July so that it can move through the verification process and kind of get to the admissions committee before some of those early August deadlines. OTCAS has not formally announced their opening date for the 2021 cycle. However, historically, it has always opened in mid-July, and so the previous cycle opened on July 18th. We expect that they will open on a similar time frame in the upcoming cycle. We do suggest that students submit their application early for OTCAS as well. And so typically within the first month that the application has been open, so by mid-August or roughly around the time that we return to classes in the fall semester. I do want to point out one difference between physical therapy programs and occupational therapy programs in that most physical therapy programs utilize the centralized PTCAS application system. However, not all OTCAS or not all occupational therapy programs utilize OTCAS. You may find a number of programs that you can apply directly to. And so you may be submitting some occupational therapy school applications through OTCAS, as well as submitting some applications directly to the school itself. In those cases, you will want to submit the individual school applications as early as possible based on the admissions guidelines on those schools' websites. I do want to point out that there are a couple of places that you can use to find information on programs. So if you do a Google search for PTCAS program directory, you will be routed to this list of PTCAS programs. And so you can search for programs either by state or by name. And so if you search by name, you'll find a list of schools. This site has information on the schools itself as well as their admissions deadlines. Now remember, most schools are going to be utilizing rolling admissions. So by and large, you can ignore the admissions deadline because you should be submitting your application very early. If we scroll all the way down, I can show you the example of what you can see based on the IU School of Health and Human Sciences DPT program. So you'll find some information on program start, as well as incoming class profiles, deadlines, deposits, and various admissions requirements. And so all of this information is available in this one handy database, which is incredibly useful so that you're not having to scroll through multiple schools' websites, which often don't even have all of the information that you're going to need on one single website page. For OTCAS, or for the occupational therapy programs as a whole, you can find that information by searching for OT school list, and it will bring you to the AOTA page. This page breaks down the difference in programs based on whether they're master's degree level programs or doctoral degree level programs, as well as where they're at in the accreditation process. So developing programs have completed step 2 of the accreditation process and are permitted to begin accepting students into their programs. In order to complete full accreditation, they have to graduate a specific number of cohorts and have their graduation and licensing pass data in order to be fully accredited. In addition, many programs are transitioning away from master's level programs and into doctoral level programs. So you will see schools that have had long-standing programs, including Indiana University. It looks like their doctoral program is new, and that's because their doctoral level program is going through, it has to go through a separate accreditation. So they're a long-standing program. They're just transitioning their program from master's level to doctoral level. If you have questions about programs, candidacy status, or any of that information, you should be able to find information on the school's specific website. In addition, this is a really good opportunity to start talking to a health professions advisor or pre-professional advisor, either in the PREPS office or the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center. So once you've started to do some research on the schools that you're interested in applying to, and you have started to identify when your respective application system opens, then you'll want to move forward with kind of preparing for that application process. The primary application system, again, that's going to be PTCAS or OTCAS, is mostly a data entry program. And so you'll find as we demo both of these sites that a lot of the entry information that you're entering is just going to be kind of data entry with a few small exceptions. These are applications that will go to, again, every school that you're applying to through that application system. And so the information that you provide is generic to the school. So you'll be commenting on applying to a physical therapy program or wanting to be a physical therapist, not necessarily talking about which specific schools you're interested in, because all schools will see the same application. This is largely used to be able to confirm the requirements for each school, so things like prerequisites, test scores, GPAs, observation requirements, and other experiences that are relevant to the school's admissions committee. The secondary application is different. So these are specific to the school, and schools that utilize secondary applications, you will find that they are largely essay based. So you can have, in the ballpark of 3 to as many as potentially 10 essay questions about either your interest in the school specifically or other components that the admissions committee would like to know more about you. This is a real opportunity for you to be able to show your personality and express your specific interest in that school. As we move into looking at the application systems themselves, there are a couple of things that are important to know. First is I encourage students to read the relevant application system instructions. I realize that instruction manuals are not the most riveting piece of reading. However, they are incredibly crucial for understanding what the application is asking of you, as well as understanding the components that are required as a part of the application. So I do suggest reading the application system instructions prior to starting your application, as well as having it on hand as a reference as you're moving through the completion of your application. The next thing that's important to understand is your transcripts. So as a requirement for your application, you will need to submit transcripts from every college campus in which you have attempted college credit. And so this will include any institutions that you may have dual credit from high school, regardless of whether that dual credit has been transferred to IUPUI or is being applied to your current degree program. Any institutions that you may have attended prior to IUPUI, including specialty schools such as nursing programs or other kind of vocational programs, as well as any graduate work that you may have done. Ideally, you'll want to have your transcripts submitted to the relevant application system prior to the date that you plan to hit submit. And so it's important to know that this process can take up to about 2 weeks. So for every institution that you're going to be requesting a transcript from, you'll have to complete that transcript request. Many institutions, including IUPUI, have an online transcript request form that you can complete. That information then has to be received and processed by the registrar's office. Then your transcripts have to be compiled, printed, and packaged for mail, mailed to the appropriate application system headquarters, received, processed, unpackaged, scanned, and attached to your application. So as you can see, that can be somewhat of a lengthy process. It is important to note that as you're thinking about ordering your transcripts, you'll want to wait until your spring grades have posted. So for IUPUI, spring grades should post to your transcripts on or around May 15th. If you're making any grades changes this semester, especially if you are planning to transition your graded course to an S or a P, you'll want to wait until that process has been completed so that that is updated on your transcript. Once your transcripts have been received and your application has been submitted, your application will be marked as complete, ready for review. If your application is submitted and the relevant application system is waiting on one or more transcripts, your application will be put on hold until those transcripts have been received. Once the application is then marked as complete, ready for review, it will move into a queue where it will wait for verification. Once the application moves to the top of the queue, It will be selected by a staff member at the application system, where they will go through line by line and compare the information that you have submitted within the application regarding all of your coursework to what appears on your transcripts. This process can take anywhere from a couple of days to several weeks, depending upon the volume of applications that are being received at that time. This is another reason we encourage students to submit their applications early, when there's a lower volume of applications being received, and therefore your application will move through the verification process quickly. It's also important to note that during this verification process, if there is found to be an error in the information that you have submitted into the application, in the sense that it doesn't match up exactly with information that appears on your transcript, your application can be returned to you with a note on the error and what needs to be corrected. Upon correction, your application then moves back into the queue. And so this is a spot where students can find that their application potentially gets held up in moving forward in the process if they're not meticulous and detail-oriented in submitting their course information. After the application has moved through the verification process, then schools will begin to look at those applications and review them for consideration for interviews. Here are some common application components that you'll find in both the PTCAS and OTCAS application systems. The first section is biographic information, which is largely asking for biographic and demographic information about you as an applicant. The second section is academic history and coursework, where you'll submit information about all of the coursework you have taken at the post-secondary level. The following section is for entrance exam scores. So for schools who require, for example, the GRE, this is where you would provide information about those particular exams. You'll have your personal statement section, as well as a section on experiences, where you include information on anything you've been doing outside of the classroom that might be relevant to your application. Each section also has a specific section to enter information about your observation hours, as well as a document section to provide information both in regards to observation hours, but potentially other school-specific relevant documents. There's a section for letters of evaluation, commonly referred to as letters of recommendation. And this is where you will submit information about the individuals who will be writing letters of recommendation on your behalf. It's important to note that you should be having conversations with your letter writers early in the cycle, ideally before the application system has opened, requesting them to write letters on your behalf. Each school may have specified preferences in terms of who they would like to see write your letters of recommendation. Common letter writer preferences include a science faculty member, and so by science they mean biology, chemistry, or physics, and by faculty they mean an instructor with whom you've taken a course. Other possible evaluation preferences might include a non-science faculty member, so someone outside of the disciplines of biology, chemistry, or physics who you've taken a course with, a supervisor, research mentor, or other individual in that kind of supervision capacity, and or a professional in either the physical therapy or occupational therapy field. So it's important to pay attention to the schools that you're planning to apply to and their preferences to ensure that you've solicited letters of recommendation from the appropriate sources. There will be a section where you will designate the schools that you're choosing to apply to, as well as fill out any school-specific information. And then there will be a section for fees. Your fees will be calculated based on the number of schools that you apply to. There's typically a flat fee for use of the application system itself, which includes the application to one school. This fee is often somewhere in the realm of $200. Then for each additional school that you choose to apply to, you'll have an additional fee. It's usually somewhere in the ballpark of $50 to $75 per school. I do want to point out that many schools who have secondary applications also have a fee associated with their secondary application. And this can be anywhere from $500 or $50 to $100 per school, not $500, $50 to $100. And so if you have concerns about the cost of applying to PT or OT programs, I encourage you to look at the fee assistance programs for each application system. You can find information on the fee assistance programs by Googling fee assistance PTCAS or fee assistance OTCAS. The fee assistance program typically provides a discounted rate towards the number of towards the fees that you'll be paying for the primary application system. And often schools who have secondary application fees will waive or greatly reduce the cost of secondary fees for individuals who have fee assistance waivers. As you begin thinking about preparing for your application, there are some things that you will want to make sure you've completed on your checklist. We've already talked about researching schools, and that's a vital component of preparing for your application. You'll also want to explore the application service itself, which is what we will be doing here in a few moments. Keep in mind that if you choose to demo the PTCAS or OTCAS systems yourself, the application system that application cycle that you are currently going to be looking at is for the fall of 2020. So your actual application will not open until July or mid-June for PTCAS. And so while you can get into the application system and poke around and do some things, you're not going to want to save or submit anything because you're not in the correct application cycle. You'll also want to make sure that you're soliciting advice from a pre-professional advisor to help you with planning and preparing for your application. If you are a School of Science major or an honors student, you can schedule an appointment with the PREP's office through SSC Campus, available in 1.IU. If you are not a School of Science major, you should schedule an appointment with the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center. Information on how to schedule with that office is available at hls.iupui.edu. You're also going to want to identify your recommenders and reach out to them early in the cycle, so ideally somewhere between now and the end of the spring semester, to request letters of recommendation and confirm who will be writing letters on your behalf. You can also start composing your essays, particularly your personal statement, as well as beginning to organize your supplemental documentation. This documentation might include information like observation hours and required verification documents, dates, times, and details about other experiences that you plan to include, and brief descriptions of each. I also strongly encourage students to pay attention to their social media presence and clean house as necessary. Admissions committees have the ability to utilize the internet to find information on prospective interviewees, and you want to make sure that your social media presence, particularly social media handles that you may have had and as a younger person that maybe you are not currently actively using, are not displaying information that paints you in a negative light. So clean house on your social media, either delete accounts or put them on private or remove specific posts so that you're not finding yourself potentially missing out on an interview opportunity based on something foolish. Additional preparation should include preparing for your interview. So each application interview will include some ethical scenarios. I strongly encourage students to read the relevant ethical guidelines for your profession, which can be found on their professional websites. In addition, paying attention to what's happening in the news in your field will help you stay informed for potential interview questions. As you're thinking about financial planning, you'll obviously want to create a budget for your application fees. But in addition, you should consider interview travel, deposits, and other things that you might be spending money on during the application process. So if you're applying locally, you may have relatively low interview travel costs. But if you're applying to an institution that requires much more substantial travel, including potentially an airplane ticket or hotel accommodations, you'll want to make sure to budget that. You'll also want to make sure to have a budget for seat deposits, which are required to maintain your seat or admissions offer at a particular school. I also encourage students to file your FAFSA early for the 2021-2022 application or academic year. And those are typically available starting in late in the fall semester prior. This will allow you to be considered for any merit-based or scholarship aid that institutions might provide. Finally, you'll want to do some parallel planning to identify an alternate plan should you not be accepted into your program of choice. This is another great opportunity to work with an advisor in the PREPS office or the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center. As we transition into looking at the application systems themselves, does anyone have any questions that you want to post to the chat box? Okay, let's start looking at the PTCAS and OTCAS application systems. I'm going to toggle between the two so that we can look at the similarities and differences between these systems. The first thing that you'll see is that the application is set up in 4 quadrants with personal information, academic history, supporting information, and program materials. This is the same for both PTCAS and OTCAS. The first section that we'll look at is your personal information section. So this is information such as your biographic information, so your name, gender, and information about your birth, contact information, including current and permanent address, email, and phone number, citizenship information, state of residency, and visa information, as well as information about your race and ethnicity. It's important to note that some components of your application may not be required fields, indicating you have an option whether to complete those prompts. Unless otherwise specified, it's important to know also that admissions committees have access to responses to all questions within your application. You'll see that the beginning sections of PTCAS are largely the same, with biographic, contact, citizenship, and race and ethnicity components. In addition, the OTCAS application has an other information section, which is largely a catch-all. This asks questions about your military status, potential felony or academic infractions. If you select yes for either, you'll have a box that you can use to complete 500 characters to provide some context regarding either. It also asks about language proficiency, and so all applicants will be asked to provide information about their native language as well as any additional languages that they speak. It also asks some background information and whether you have previously enrolled in an occupational therapy program. In addition, the PTCAS application asks for information about your parent or guardian. This information is only used for data and recruitment purposes and is therefore not available to the admissions committee. They also have information about your economic, educational, and environmental factors. So questions such as your family situation, childhood residency, high school information, and whether you consider yourself a disadvantaged applicant. If you select yes, you will have 4,500 characters to provide information on why you feel you should be considered as a disadvantaged student and how that has impacted you. The last component of this PTCAS application section is other information, which is the same kind of catch-all, including information on language proficiency, military status, felonies, academic or license infractions, as well as information on your academic record, previous physical therapy education, or any interruptions to your education due to military service or other reasons. I also want to point out that you can see in the PTCAS section this application release. Both applications have an application release section where you'll be required to submit release information for the use of your application. One particularly important release is the advisor release. This is an option for you to release parts of your application to pre-health advisors on the schools that you've attended. This allows us as your advisor to be able to assist you through the admissions process. This is only a select number of advisors who have been appointed by the school, and we don't have access to all information. So I cannot see things like your personal statement, the contents of your letters of recommendation, or other sensitive data. What I can see is information such as your test scores, your calculated GPAs, the schools that you've applied to, as well as your applicant status at each school. If you're scheduling an appointment with an advisor, this is helpful so that we can help prepare you for moving forward in the application process, and or if you need to reapply in a subsequent application cycle. Moving forward in both applications, you'll see that the next section is academic history. The first section within academic history asks for information about the high school that you have attended. You will not be required to submit high school transcripts. The next section asks for you to submit information about every college campus that you have attended. For each school, it will require you to submit information about the school name, whether you were planning on obtaining a degree from that institution. If so, whether that degree is in progress or has already been awarded, information about your major, graduation timeline, and whether the school was on a semester, quarter, or trimester schedule. You'll want to complete a separate entry for every campus you've attended. For example, if you have credit from another IU campus, such as IU Bloomington, or a regional campus, such as IU Kokomo, you would include those campuses separately from IUPUI when you enter information about your colleges or universities. Similarly, any additional institutions that you have college credit from, where you will be requesting a transcript, should be entered here individually. In the PTCAS application, you can see that the college's attended section is exactly the same. After you entered information about the colleges that you've attended, you will be able to download a transcript request form. This form is a PDF file that you can save and or print, which has information relevant to the transcripts that you will be requesting. This form has your individual CAS ID, name, the name of the institution that you are requesting a transcript from, as well as where those transcripts should be mailed to. It also includes a barcode that allows the application system to easily match your transcripts with your application upon receipt. This is where we want to differentiate between the number of transcripts that you'll be requesting and the number of campuses that you're submitting into your application. So IUPUI, as part of the larger IU system, utilizes a centralized transcript. When you order your transcript from IUPUI, it will have information on every IU campus that you have attended. Therefore, if you have college credit from multiple campuses, which should have been entered separately into the OTCAS or PTCAS application system, you will only need to order and pay for one transcript to be sent to OTCAS or PTCAS. It doesn't matter whether you use the IUPUI transcript matching form or the transcript matching form that's associated with a separate campus. As they are received, they will indicate that they have the information for all IU campuses. Other institutions, such as Ivy Tech, follow a similar model. It is important to note that not every college who has multiple campuses utilizes a centralized transcript, and so there may be institutions in which you need to request transcripts separately from individual campuses. If you have questions, you should contact the registrar's office at the school for which you are requesting transcripts to get additional details. This form can be submitted online through the IUPUI request, which will then be packaged and mailed with your transcripts as it's sent to either OTCAS or PTCAS. Moving forward into the transcript entry, you will enter information on everywhere that you have college credit from. So for each institution, you'll provide information about every course you've taken. You should be entering course information at the home school that it was taken, even if it was transferred to IUPUI or another institution. You'll start by selecting the term, academic status, and whether the course has been completed or is currently in progress or being planned for a future semester. You'll then add information about the course itself. The course code is the full number of the course. So for example, K101 should be entered as BIOL-K101. The course title is Concepts of Biology 1. You'll then select a subject category that's associated with that course. This should be based on the content of the course, not necessarily the course number designation. For example, BIOL-N261 is human anatomy. That should not be categorized as biology because the course number is a BIOL course, but should be categorized as anatomy based on the content of the course itself. You'll then enter information on the number of credit hours as well as the grade for each course. Hit save and complete for every course that you have taken and or have planned to take prior to applying or matriculating into a program. This is the part of your application where you will want to spend some time and be meticulous. I encourage students to print a copy of your unofficial transcripts, grab a ruler and a marker. As you move through your transcript, submit the information into the application in order and mark those off your transcript as you go. This way you can ensure that you are entering all of your coursework and then go back and double check before you finalize and submit. In the PTCAS application, you will find that that section looks exactly the same. If I had entered information about the colleges I had attended, I would be able to enter transcript information next. The following section, you can add information on standardized tests. Please note that even though the ACT score is included here, most schools are not requiring you to submit ACT information. You will want to submit information for your GRE if that is required for any of the schools to which you are applying. You may have additional test scores to report, including perhaps the TOEFL or other exams. Adding a test score simply means sharing information about when you have taken or plan to take your exam, your registration code, and then should you choose to self-report your scores, you may do that. However, official scores will be sent to schools and will be matched with your application. In the PTCAS section, you will see a very similar layout where you will provide the same information about the GRE. The next section of your application is your supporting information section. And this is where you will find information that will help the admissions committee learn more about you. The first thing that you will find is a section where you can submit information about the individuals who will be writing your letters of recommendation. You will provide information on the evaluator's name and contact information, as well as submitting a deadline. This should be the agreed upon deadline that you and your letter writer have decided upon. And in my suggestion, should be the date in which you plan to submit your application. This way, your letter writer knows to have their letter submitted to the application by the same time you plan to submit your application. This way, as the application moves through the verification process, which again can take anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, should any of your letter writers be slightly behind or miss a deadline, you have time to follow up with them and ensure that your letters have been attached to your application by the time that it completes verification. You can also write a personal message to your evaluator, perhaps something along the lines of "Thank you so much for being willing to write a letter on my behalf." Once you've completed the waiver section and hit save, this will generate an automatic email to that letter writer using the email address that you have included. This email will have information for your letter writer to access the application and upload their evaluation directly. It's important to note that if you set a deadline of, for example, July 15th, but do not go into the application to complete this section until July 15th, your letter writers will not have received the information yet to submit. So this, along with your academic history section, are two areas of your application that you should prioritize completing first. For each system, you will have a minimum as well as a maximum number of letter writers that you can include. For OTCAS, the minimum is 3 letters of recommendation with a maximum of 5. In PTCAS, you are required to submit as many references as are needed. Your reference request will look exactly the same in PTCAS and OTCAS. The next section in each application is your observation hours. And so this is where you will submit information on your shadowing as required by the programs to which you're applying. It's important to make sure that you've reviewed the observation hour requirements, including any specifics regarding setting, prior to completing those requirements. When you add observation hours into OTCAS, you will provide information about the facility at which you completed your observation, the start and end date, and information about the type of observation and hours based on setting. You can include both hours completed as well as hours planned or in progress. However, schools will likely only consider hours completed towards any requirements that they may have for your application. You'll then save and move forward with completing any additional observation hours. In PTCAS, this looks largely the same with one small difference. As you scroll to the end, it's going to ask you how you would like to have your PT hours verified. You can select to send your PT observation hours to the PT supervisor for verification, to upload a signed form verifying your PT observation hours, or to not have your PT observation hours verified. It's important to know that many schools will have preferences, and likely most will want to have your hours verified. So you should move forward with having your PT supervisor either agree to verify your hours via email or sign a form in advance. The next section in each is your experiences section. And this is where you'll be able to add information to your application about those things you've participated in outside of the classroom. Experiences might include things such as full or part-time employment, extracurriculars, healthcare or clinical experience, research, teaching, volunteering, or other types of leadership. Similar to your observation hours, you'll provide information about the organization, supervisor, dates, type of experience, average weekly hours, number of weeks, and a small description for each experience. Your 600-character experience description should focus on the following: approximately one sentence that addresses the context or description of the activity itself, one sentence that focuses on the major accomplishments or crowning achievements as a part of your participation in this experience, and the remaining space used to address the transformation of this experience on your pursuit of either a physical therapy or occupational therapy degree. You will include as many experiences as you find sufficient. In PTCAS, again, the application section looks exactly the same with a similar 600-character description box. You will also have an opportunity to provide information on relevant achievements, which may include things such as awards, honors, or scholarships. Your brief 600-character description should focus largely on the merit for which these awards, honors, or scholarships were determined. Merit is much more important than, for example, the total dollar amount of a scholarship. OTCAS, again, has the exact same experiences section. OTCAS also has a section to share information about licenses or certifications for example, a basic life support certification, or perhaps a CNA license that you may want to include. PTCAS has the exact same section with the same relevant information, as well as the ability to upload a copy of your certification. OTCAS has a document section embedded within the application itself. This is where you will submit information, including your personal statement, as an attached document. Please make sure to read the instructions. It is often preferred that your application documents are submitted in PDF form rather than in Word docs. You will also provide documentation for all of your observation hours that you have submitted in the observation hours section of your application. You can find relevant information by clicking on this link for any documentation requirements. PTCAS is a little bit different, and you will have a separate section where you will simply copy and paste the text of your personal essay into the field for your application. Finally, OTCAS release statement is found here within the supporting document section. This is the same type of release that we talked about earlier in PTCAS, which in that application is located in the personal information section. The next section will be selecting schools to which you want to apply. You can do this by going to the Add Program tab, where you will see any programs whose deadlines have not already passed. As you can see in PTCAS, there are a number of schools who have deadlines that are very far out in the future. This is an opportunity for you to add any additional schools to which you want to apply by simply clicking on the plus box. As you can imagine, in the OTCAS system, it's very similar. You will find any programs that have a deadline that has not already passed, and you can add them into your application by simply selecting the plus. You'll find information about those programs that you have selected in the Program Materials section. Here, you will be able to toggle between the schools that you have selected to apply to. Each school will have a homepage which provides some information from the school itself. Largely, you might find information on the program as well as relevant application details. You will also find in each section a prerequisites tab where, had I entered all of my transcript information and verified that I had completed that section, I would be able to associate my coursework with the prerequisite coursework for the individual schools. This helps schools identify which courses you have taken or plan to take that will meet all of the requirements of their prerequisites. You can also see that this particular school has a questions section. So we talked before about secondary applications. Some schools choose to embed their secondary application within the primary application itself. As you can see, there are a number of different questions listed here, including, have you previously applied to this PT program? And if so, what have you done to strengthen your application? As well as some school-specific questions with relevant character or page or word limits. As you can see, as we toggle between the schools, most of the schools within PTCAS have the same format. However, you'll see here this Doctor of Physical Therapy at Dallas for the University of St. Augustine has an additional section for documents. This is where they are asking you to upload a resume, which you will attach, as well as your statement of purpose. Information about the statement of purpose, which is specific to this particular program, should be available on their admissions website, which you can find here. As we look at the program details with an OTCAS, you will see that this largely looks similar. You can toggle between the programs, and each program is going to have a homepage, again, with information that the school has provided to you, largely about the program itself, as well as the application process. There is another prerequisite section where, again, had I completed my coursework and reviewed it for completion, I would be able to match my coursework to the prerequisite requirements for each school. Within OTCAS, some schools may also choose to embed their secondary application questions within the primary application itself. Here you can see that most of the questions for this particular school are simply yes, no. This also has a document section, and this particular program is asking you to submit an essay, which they have identified here should articulate your personal and professional goals, provide a self-assessment of your potential as a leader and change agent, and other information that they're requesting. You can see that in OTCAS, the types of documentation required will change between schools. In this particular school, they are asking for you to complete an observation form to document your experience, which then would be submitted through the document section. Once you've completed all of the relevant components to any schools that you are selecting to apply to, you can move forward to the Submit Application section. In this section, you'll find information on each school that you're selecting to apply to and how far you've gone in completing that particular school's application. You can also see that it will not allow you to submit applications to schools who have deadlines that have already passed. If this school had a deadline that was not already expired and I had completed all of the components, therefore the progress indicator was full and the checkmark icon was illuminated, I would be able to submit information to this school when I submit my application. The application will also calculate the total based on the total flat fee as well as additional school fees. You'll be able to provide your credit card information and hit submit. The section looks exactly the same in the OTCAS application. The last section that's important to know is the check statuses component of your application. So this is where you are able to provide some follow-up by tracking the components of your application that either OTCAS or PTCAS are expecting. For example, I had provided information on attendance at IUPUI, and that tells OTCAS that they should be expecting a transcript from this institution. I can track whether that has arrived, and once it's been attached to my application, this status would change. Had I provided information about individuals who would be writing my letters of recommendation, I would see a similar section for evaluators, which with each letter writer's information and whether that information or whether that letter had been received and attached to my application. You will not be able to see the contents of your letters or your evaluations in the check status of your application. You can also track the application status specific to each school, whether it's in progress, has been verified, received, and if the school so chooses, whether you have been selected for an interview and an admissions decision. You can also download a PDF copy of your application, which is particularly helpful if you might be participating in something like a mock interview. That way, your interviewer has access to the same types of information the admissions committee at the schools has. You can also see that the PTCAS check status application looks exactly the same. I have not provided any college information into this application system, which is why there's no section for transcripts. Finally, when you move to the front dashboard, you will also have your notifications section. This section will provide notifications specific to your application, such as if your account has been updated or when things like the academic update period have started. Academic update is an opportunity for you to provide information after grades have posted for the fall semester on courses that you have marked in the academic history section of your application as pending or planned. At this point, we have now gone through the application process and timeline for physical therapy and occupational therapy programs and have demoed both the PTCAS and OTCAS application systems. If anyone has any final questions, I would ask that you submit those into the chat now so that we can address those as the workshop is coming to a close. Since we don't have any questions, I would let you know that you can contact advisors within the PREPS office or the Health and Life Sciences Advising Center as you are preparing for your application and if questions arise during that process. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and have a good afternoon.